Hey there viewers, and welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at rebuilding this recoil starter, because we've never had this happen before. So step one is going to be to take a 10mm socket, and we're going to take the starter off the top of our engine. You don't even have to drain the gas or the oil. This bolt here, it's a nut, if it continues to spin and is very difficult to remove, you're just gonna have to keep turning it, because what's happening is the stud is unscrewing out of the engine block. So you'll know when you've turned it enough when you can pick up on the front of the fan shroud and it lifts. So you'll have to do that on any of these where the flange nut is not easily removable. So what's then going to happen is the gas tank, fan shroud, and starter are all going to come off together, and you'll see that stud, which is here, it'll still be attached, and you can put a combination wrench on the back side of it, hold it, and zip the nut off. If everything came apart all nice like this engine, you can simply take the starter and rebuild it. So putting all that stuff aside, if your rope broke, if it's frayed, I would get a minimum of the same amount of rope that your engine had on it. You can untie the little knot in here, pull it out, and kind of figure out how much you need. I usually would buy an extra foot or two. Most hardware stores sell this rope. We'll go ahead and remove the rope from the handle. So the handle is by itself, and it looks like I got about 3 feet of rope. I know this starter can do like 6 feet plus of rope. So anyway, you'll take your cut length of rope, you'll tie this type of a fancy knot in it, or something similar, and then we'll just thread that rope all quick and easy through the hole in the starter handle. It's actually not going to cooperate, probably because I turned the camera on. Yeah, so anyway, that being said, we'll pull it through like such. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your starter, and you'll notice that we can only wind one way, and that's this direction, because you can see the little teeth for the starter popping out, those little cams. That is the direction you want to wind this. So all we're going to do is rewind the spring, put a new rope in it. So you can see I've marked here because there's a hole drilled through the spool where the rope will actually tie off. So if all I'm doing is replacing the rope, I'm simply going to wind this starter up until it doesn't wind anymore, making sure to turn it the appropriate direction, obviously. Okay, it's now hit the end of the spring, and you can see the little hole where the rope goes through the spool, and the hole here where it goes through the starter basket. What that means is if I put the rope in it right now, that somebody's going to be able to over-exert the spring and break the spring. So to prevent that from happening, because this is the end of the spring's travel, I'm actually going to back it off a full complete turn. Okay, and at that point, I probably should roast the end of this rope slightly with a lighter so that it stays straight. We're simply going to thread that rope through everything such that this is kind of tough to do on camera. Okay, so I'm having a hard time with it. I am going to stick something in the starter basket just to hold that spring. I'm going to hit the end of this with a lighter real quick. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. Meanwhile, back at the starter. So like I said, we're going to go through the little grommet and through underneath. And if you're lucky, it's going to all come poking out the spool, just like that. So hopefully that all happened on the camera. We're going to pull the rope through. We're going to release tension. And then we're simply going to tie a knot. It can be a cheesy regular knot. And then we'll pull the rope, tuck the tail, and you can see that but that starter is completely functional. But that's not good enough for what we're going to do here. That's probably good enough for most of these starters. Let's go ahead and tear this thing down completely. So step one on the tear down, we're going to pull all the rope out. We're going to grab the knot, and we're going to pick the knot. Okay, like such. Hopefully you can kind of see what we're doing here. And then we're going to pull the rope completely out of the starter and just set that aside. We're going to release spring tension. Okay, just like such. We're going to take a T25, excuse me, and this is a backwards threaded. So it's righty loosey, lefty tighty. So we're going to pretend that we're tightening this screw up. And you can buy the individual parts for the starter, although it's probably not cost effective to do that. We're going to unthread this guy and take him, just set it off to the side. Take this guy out. If your starter fails to engage, it's probably because either the spring broke, meaning these little guys don't flop out when you pull the rope. It's probably because this spring broke, this little plate, friction washer, whatever you want to call it, broke, or these little cams themselves have broken. So we're just going to pull those out. Want to check them for wear. Everything looks good, obviously, on these because it's basically a new engine for all intents and purposes. Those are individually replaceable. We're going to pull this spring out. It's super important that your starter has that spring in it. If it doesn't, all this friction stuff doesn't work correctly. At this point, I'm going to make sure there's no tension on the spool, and we're going to put our safety glasses on in case this blows up in your face. Oh, okay. So we're just going to let the rest of that spring tension out. So everything's safe now. Sometimes if you turn it over the other way, it'll just kind of drop out of there. So we've got the spool out. We're just going to set that to the side, and we didn't crunch our spring up too bad. So we've got our spring setting as well. So let's take a quick view of all the parts that we have so far. We have our basket, the spring, friction washer, other spring, the two cams, the left-hand thread screw, and the spool, and we have the pull cord. Next, we're going to clean this guy up with a rag, and then we're going to clean this guy up with a rag, and the inside here actually already looks clean, so we're not going to do anything with that spool. Then we'll put it together. Okay, so if your starter is slow to retract the pull cord, there's a couple of things that can happen. One is this screw is just too tight, which is typically not the case. Or two, this spring, we're going to use JB because he's twice as good. This spring has a lot of shmoo on it, and you can see mine is a little bit that case. So we're just going to put a little bit of spray lube on it. You're going to make sure that tab does not get under your skin, literally. And we're just going to pull the spring through it, trying not to tie this spring in a great big knot. And you can kind of see that it's actually cleaning that spring pretty well. So we'll just switch out spots in the rag. We don't want to put too much lube on this, but we want enough that it doesn't rust, because too much lube equals dirt sticking, things not working well, comebacks, those types of things. Okay, so our spring is good, really. Okay, that's good. We're going to wipe off this guy here, just making sure there's no trash on that. And we're going to be ready for reassembly. Okay, if the spring is broke, you can buy a spring. I have tried rebending tabs and it's not worth your time. Didn't work out for me. So now we're ready to put the spring back into the basket, or into the spool. And how you're going to do that is, if you look, there's a little window with a spot for the tang on it to rest. Hopefully you can see that. So we're going to put the end, we're going to take the spring like such, and we're going to put the end Maybe if I did it in frame. Sorry, guys. We're going to put the end of it in like such. And then we're simply going to keep rotating this. I'm using my thumb to keep it tucked inside. If you don't, it's probably going to come fly out in your face. It scares you a bit. Just going to keep doing that. Looks like I got a knot. Nope. Just a little bit difficult toward the end. Okay. Then, now that that's in, we're just going to massage that little hook until he's about halfway in that window. Okay. We're going to bring the basket up, and you can see there's a slit here in the basket. We're going to line up that little slit with the tab. And everything should click in and sit nice and flat. If it doesn't sit nice and flat, then we have a problem. You can see that the starter is actually kind of working at this point. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put these two little cams back in. Okay. Okay. We're going to put the spring in, and then we're going to put this little plate on top, but we're going to make sure that we smash it down where the little cams actually engage with the plate. Then we're kind of going to hold it there, and we're going to pretend that we're loosening this T27, and we're actually tightening it. We're going to run it all the way down and probably back it off a half a turn. So we're not going to tighten it because it's just plastic. So it's snug, and then maybe about that much, and you should be able to kind of see how springy that is. That's where we want it. At this next point, we're going to wind the spring. Maybe I'll do it such that you can see it a little easier. Okay, we've reached the limit. Again, our hole is not past. You know, if this little hole ended up over here, we're good, because you can't possibly pull the rope out that far. So because we've still got another 2 inches, 3 inches of travel, we're actually going to back that spring off a little bit so that somebody pulls all the rope out, they don't break the spring. And then we're just going to casually thread it all through. A lot of folks like to thread the rope up over this red part here. It's not what you want to do. I'm going to pull the rope through the starter, and then we're simply going to tie, I call it a simple knot. It probably actually has a name, but we want to make sure there's enough tail that that doesn't get like sucked through later on. Okay, and then I just tuck everybody down in there, and no matter how much you pull, if it drags a little bit, all you got to do is just back that screw off a little bit. Well, there you got it, folks. That is how you rebuild the starter, at least tear it down and put it back together on your Honda GC series. The GXs are pretty similar to that. The starter spool is a little bit different. The fastener is a little bit different as well. The GX series definitely worth rebuilding. It's the one made out of metal and it's usually red. You kind of know what I mean, but if you watch this tutorial, it should pretty well explain most all of the starters. The only one I've had a tough time rebuilding are the older style Tecumseh with the pressed in roll pin looking thing in the center. You can replace the rope on those, but by the time you screw with the starter, it's probably just more worth it to get an aftermarket one, or so, unless you got a lot of patience. So anyway, hopefully this helps you out, and as always, thanks for watching.